Okay. And welcome back, folks, to Truth versus News. We're filming it on the 29th of December. This is going to air on the January 2nd. So happy New Year to everybody. Hopefully you come back and having a good, strong, better decade than we've had last. As we're showing it seems that the modern technology that we have here can be used for good or for evil and things. But it looks like the evil powers have taken over and really causing troubles. So let's get back into it with Jim Fetzer and Scott Bennett. Next story here.
We have a late development here regarding the death of the wife of the Psychology Today editor who had testified about the ease with which the tech giants are manipulating the outcomes of elections and how much worse it's going to be in 2020. Bring us up to date.
Well, I'm just looking on the website dailymail.co.uk. People can Google it. And the story is coming out today, December 29th. Wife, 29, of Google whistleblower who exposed meddling in the 2016 election is killed in a car crash after she lost control and veered into the path of a tractor trailer. So her car is mysteriously lost control or is taken over by something and veers into a tractor trailer.
Controls are easy to manipulate, Scott. You can design it. So you just pull her in front of the tractor trailer.
Yep.
Tell us more about the story.
Well, the story is the wife of a Google whistleblower who exposed meddling in the 2016 election died Friday night, just days after she was seriously injured in a car crash. Psychology professor Robert Epstein, 66. So he's 66 years old, married to a 29-year-old wife, 37 years younger than him.
40 years younger. That's quite stunning all by itself.
That's stunning all by itself. 29. I don't know how many 29-year-old girls are going with a guy who sounds like he dances in a gay parade in San Francisco.
She could be his granddaughter.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's 66 and she's 29. There's something funny there. Okay. Robert Epstein, who you just pointed out was the guy who went in front of Congress and testified, shared in a heartbreaking tweet, he announced this in a tweet, that his wife, Misty Dawn Vaughn, that's spelled M-I-S-T-I, Dawn, like it sounds, Vaughn.
This is a stripper name.
It sounds like okay, maybe. Yeah. Misty Dawn Vaughn died after her vehicle spun out of control along a slippery road in California and into the path of a tractor trailer. My beautiful wife, Misty, a published poet, succumbed last night to injuries sustained in a car accident, her grieving husband wrote. I was supposed to die in your arms someday, but a slippery road has ruined everything. You are not just my love, you are my greatest adventure. Jim,
the vehicle, if it's relatively modern, it has computerized controls that can be manipulated remotely. Does it describe the car?
It does not.
Correct. Does it say it happened? The mail usually has a lot of photographs, Scott.
Yeah.
Can you share on the article?
It must be a new car.
Yeah.
No, it's share on the article.
Yeah, okay, here we've got pictures of her. She looks Asian. She looks like Filipino or something. And you got pictures of him here. You can Google it, but look at dailymail.co.uk.
No, yeah. You can show it good, but if you can't, you can't.
I'll get it up for enter it in. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll send you the link and you can put it in. But that's pretty telling. A 29-year-old girl is married to a 66-year-old guy, so that's 37 years.
It's about 4 years. Just round it off. It's easier to remember.
Yeah.
And the point is, if it's a modern vehicle, it's going to have computerized controls, and this kind of accident is incredibly rare. This looks on its face like retaliation for having, exposed a state secret. Very, very troubling.
Right.
Here it says she was driving in San Diego area. She was driving along Rain Slick Interstate 15 in Escondido.
Okay. Anyway.
Interstate. Those are huge, and those are divided. I mean, you got 8 lanes one way, 8 lanes the other. I mean, this is ridiculous. The story
Head-on collision.
on its face.
Mm.
Scott, thanks for the update.
Yeah.
Go with our continuation. We left off with conspiracy. Judge finds conspiracy hook theorists from Oregon in contempt of court because I thought they weren't the same guy. I was actually looking for an impeachment witness, which according to my understanding, the statute doesn't require identification in advance, but the judge would have none of it and reprehended, he chewed me out pretty good and then fined me $7 grand. Here's the top 10 story of 2019, number 4. This could easily be number 1. VA legislators threaten Second Amendment sanctuary cities with National Guard. Virginia lawmakers. Virginia is the new battleground for the Second Amendment. After the most recent election, the state's House and Senate are both Democrat majorities and haven't wasted a minute in attempting to gut the gun laws in what has historically been a permissive state. Since the above was written, it should be noted Second Amendment sanctuary counties are at 80 in county. What they've done is taken a page from the liberal playbook of declaring themselves to be sanctuaries for illegal immigrants and excluding ICE. They're declaring these counties to be Second Amendment sanctuaries immune from violation of their rights. The difference being the Democrats are supporting violations of the law and the Constitution. These guys are supporting upholding the Constitution and the Second Amendment. After the public outcry, Governor Northam said a provision would be added for current gun owners. After one sheriff even vowed to deputize citizens should these unconstitutional laws pass. In this case, the governor's assault weapons ban will include a grandfather clause for individuals who already own assault weapons, with a requirement they register their weapons before the end of a designated grace period. We all know registration is a prelude to confiscation. Once they know where the guns are, they know where to seize them. Gun owners aren't going to take this lying down. We've written before about Second Amendment sanctuaries popping up across the nation. Now Virginia's joined the fight. According to Gun Rights Watch, practically the entire state is saying no. Check out this map. Actually, those yellows have turned green too. So now you have like 80%, 90% of the state is a Second Amendment sanctuary. And in fact, Mike Adams of Natural News, who follows this issue very closely, has suggested this is a way to respond nationwide to the tyranny. Have county after county across the nation declare itself to be a Second Amendment sanctuary. I just remind you now of Dr. Eowyn, who hosts a fellowship with the Mind in her crime map, where we know that there are more crimes in areas that are gun-free zones because they're controlled by the Democrats. Look at Los Angeles, look at Arizona, look at Chicago, look at Seattle. How could anyone in their right mind possibly think taking guns away from law-abiding citizens is going to reduce crime? It's going to increase it because the criminals will know they have a free fire zone. There's no one out there to oppose them. This is what the Democrats want to do. Not only turn every city into America, into a feces-laden emporium, but to allow free fire zones all over the country. And you can understand why residents in rural areas are particularly apprehensive, because without guns, they won't be able to defend themselves from marauding gangs who come from urban areas to loot and rape and pillage. This is lunacy. It begins, Virginia forms active militia to protect sheriff's citizens from unconstitutional laws. This is exactly what the Second Amendment meant about a militia, citizen soldiers in the state organizing to defend themselves from tyranny imposed from without, or in this case, from within. Things are getting really bad in Virginia, but this group isn't going down without a fight. National Guardsmen, we will not comply if ordered by the Virginia governor to arrest police or confiscate guns. There's going to be a major rally on the 20th of January. It's a date when there's a Citizens Defense League in Virginia normally comes to the Capitol in Richmond to petition legislators about the needs of the citizens. There's a major Second Amendment rally sponsored there, but it looks like a setup. We have reports of planned false flags, including driving a big truck laden with explosives to kill hundreds, even thousands, driven ostensibly by a Muslim who's upset with Trump, or that a fake militiaman will turn a weapon onto the crowd and say, you know, this is a defense for the making America great again. The best idea, I believe, is not to go. But I tell you, the scenario looks like it may play out the following way. Because their citizen resistance, they're going to set up checkpoints on the highways, confiscate weapons, require everyone be vaccinated, separate men, women, and children, and send them to FEMA camps. If there's protests by locals, the militia, the governor will bring in the National Guard. Trump will federalize the National Guard. Pelosi will claim because Trump has been impeached, he's not the legitimate president, and request the United Nations, at which point all hell will break loose.
Oh, wow.
This is absolutely stunning stuff. What's most important about what's going on here in relation to Eric Swalwell, a California lunatic and gun zealot, is that we have a simultaneous attack on the First and the Second Amendment. We know that during the 20th century, there were 19 democides or slaughters of whole societies, each of which was preceded by gun confiscation. We can't let it happen here. They're attacking the First Amendment because they don't want us to speak out and point out, for example, that studies have shown that Americans use guns for defensive purposes between 500,000 and 3 million times every single year, saving an estimated 200,000 lives. If you put together all the alleged reported mass shootings from Sandy Hook to Orlando to Parkland to Las Vegas, you might get 200. We're talking about 200,000 lives saved. All who have looked at this matter seriously know that gun ownership and homicide rates are inversely related. The more guns, the lower the homicide rate. So the U.S. and Canada, with highest gun ownership, have the lowest homicide rate. Brazil, low gun ownership, high homicide rate. African countries, low gun ownership, high homicide rate. Russia, low ownership, high homicide rate. There are innumerable reasons for keeping our guns. When they come for our guns, the time has come to use them.
Mhm.
Well, I see the rally you're describing in January on the 20th as another replay of the Charlottesville shooting false flag hoax that was acted out using a car and crisis actors and acrobats and stuntmen. I can see them doing the same thing in this particular Second Amendment sort of rally in Virginia. So I, of course, if they are having any sort of a rally, any sort of activity pro Second Amendment, I think that's precisely where conservatives and Second Amendment, champions need to be, not necessarily chanting and waving flags and stuff, but they certainly need to be present, videotaping and recording any suspicious activity or potential false flag setup, because that's how you scuttle that, you disband it. So I think this is a sign of the times of things to follow. People rising up and declaring the Second Amendment, as well as all the First Amendment and others, they're non-negotiable. Those are inviolable rights that cannot be suspended or terminated without due process of law. And even in the case of the quote felony for possession of a handgun or a firearm after a person is convicted of a felony, that's unconstitutional, because the Second Amendment does not say that you can be stripped of your Second Amendment rights just because you've been guilty of a felony or judged guilty of a felony, which may include 100-1, like Michael Flynn, making a quote false statement to a government agent. In this case, it was Peter Strzok and Lisa Page who set him up. So these felonious laws that seek to prevent people from having guns are unconstitutional. The Constitution never allows for people to be in a perpetual state of slavery, which is what the felony interpretations are trying to do. I think we're on the road to a civil war, Jim. I really honestly see that coming because you've got police and military who've been in Iraq, who've been in Syria, who've been in Afghanistan for 20 years. They are used to roughhousing and controlling populations and throwing people on the ground and putting them in zip ties and putting them into interrogation mode. The military has been traumatized and trained by the Israelis to do a lot of that. And I don't think it's a very difficult leap for them to come back here and do it in America. Not all of them, but a large percentage of them are psychotic and bad seed, violent thugs. And the police are the same way. There are some good ones, and there are some very thuggish, aggressive tyrants.
What's very interesting about what you're observing, Scott, is one commentator, a very thoughtful guy, has said they're going to use not the National Guard, but mercenary forces, private armies, private contractors to do dirty work. And that would throw a complete wrench into all of this. I mean, then I think you might even have to call out the U.S. military to put down these private armies.
Oh.
Yeah, especially if they're Israeli.
In a predicament, he's going to have to make wise decisions here.
Well, the easiest thing he can do is declare the Second Amendment is a inviolable right, and by executive order, if he can declare an executive order that recognizes, quote, Israel and anti-Semitism and forcibly does this, law against all schools so that they can't protest Israel, he can certainly do an executive order that recognizes the Second Amendment is the right to keep and bear arms, to carry concealed and unconcealed, that every American has to protect their family and their property and their life. That's his quickest way to guarantee that good citizens have the right to both defend themselves, but also defend against the coming false flags and mercenary ops and false shooting hoaxes that they are going to introduce to try and traumatize America into a similar scenario of the Charlottesville massacre, the New Zealand shooting false flag attack. They're going to be replicating these, and the only way to combat it is to have people on the ground armed with cameras and their own firearms to defend themselves, and that will send them backwards. Jim?
A suggestion I've also heard very consistent with your observations is for sheriffs to send in deputies undercover with cameras to record everything going on, to keep a complete record to expose it all. Scott, would you be willing to reach out to recommend that be done? Perhaps we could make some effort to contact the appropriate authority. We're talking about the sheriff of the county in which Richmond, Virginia is located. There's another motivation involved here, by the way. Many government employees live in Virginia. So the idea here is to, cover them by initiating this there, but where it appears that Michael Bloomberg was responsible for financing the legislative races that put all these people into office. So here you have a billionaire worth an estimated $55 billion, Trump only $3 billion, picayune by comparison, intervening in local and state politics to promote his personal agenda because Michael Bloomberg is an anti-gun zealot. I think it's disgusting and a form of treason. He should be doing this, but that's what's happening in Virginia.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a great crime. Yeah, and I saw that in Virginia when I was there. I saw the Bloomberg attempts at undermining the National Rifle Association, the gun shows that they have in Virginia that are very, 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 very professional. I've been to many of these gun shows in Virginia when I lived in Washington, D.C. You cannot go in and just simply buy a gun. You go in, you have to fill out the appropriate background paperwork. It usually takes a day or at least 4 or 5 or 6 hours for the Alcohol, Firearms, and Tobacco Agency that does the background check to get it back to you. Then you can walk out the door with your firearm. But they are very controlled environments, and no one just goes in and gets guns. So these arguments about gun shows and all that are preposterous, but it's a larger political agenda to traumatize people, to retard people, into this fetal position of helplessness, so that they are better managed into economic drones, an economic drone society. And we've lost all sense of manhood, all sense of alpha male leadership, all sense of complementariness to men and women and marriage and the family. That's been disintegrated, and what you're left with is a nation of strangers, and that estrangement leads to a lot of these social decays and social violence. And I honestly think the only thing that's going to come around in 2020 is a preparation, if not the ignition, of a civil war. And it's going to be localized. It's not going to be General Lee leading cavalry, up and down the Carolinas. This is going to be county by county, state by state, town by town, Second Amendment affirmations. So I think that's coming.
Warfare, Scott, no question about it. James McCanney, whom I regard as quite a brilliant guy, has sent me an email. This is the Hunger Games, the ultra-rich controllers and the groveling populace to be pushed and moved as pieces on a game board. They're trying to recreate a feudal society in which you have the super rich in their castles surrounded by moats, and the rest of us as peasants toiling in the field. That's the model they have in mind. It is stunning.
Yeah.
And get this, there's a legislator in Virginia who's now proposing that single family dwellings should not be permitted by zoning, so that poor people and homeless people can move into their communities and occupy housing. She claims it's racist to have single family dwellings. That is not going to play well in Virginia.
No. And the deep state is really pushing very hard, you can see, to keep strife and tensions going in, and to try to cause anything they can to get us fighting against each other, instead of realizing that we're being played into that action. And also in these gun shows, Scott, how many deaths have happened in gun shows?
None that I can recall, because everyone is there. A very safe environment. A lot of people are armed, of course, too. But gun owners and people who are part of that culture are former military or active military or police themselves. It is the greatest patriots in the country are gun owners and gun enthusiasts, because they are traditional family folks. They are, yes, they usually vote for Trump in probably the 99 percentile, but these are the people that are the citizen soldiers and the citizen deputies that keep your community safe. They are not out there shooting guns in the air or getting drunk or going out, on freeways and shooting up places. Those are the leftist Antifa Democrat lunatic fringe. And those are the real dangers that need to be put down. But I think you're suggesting, Jim, of people wearing undercover cameras, and with the phone technology we have today, I think a lot more of these things are going to be exposed. But of course, they're going to be exposed on channels like RT, Russia Today, and Press TV, because the mainstream media in this country, aside from Don's show, is completely dead. That's the real tragedy in this country, is that we have a lobotomized media of cowards and just faithless
propagandists and disinformation specialists, and they're dominated by the Mossad. Remember that panel I have of 100 executives from CNN. They're all dual U.S. Israeli citizens. A panel of 100 executives from CNN, NBC, all of whom are dual U.S. Israeli citizens. A panel of 100 executives from the New York Times, all dual U.S. Israeli citizens. These people are not our friends.
And remember Jason Goodman, Jim, when we exposed the New Zealand shooting, Jason Goodman, who I consider really a traitor and a Mossad agent now, after what he tried to entrap me in with false people calling me and trying to lure me into a situation. Jason Goodman argued and had this theory of the missing bullets were just because of the JPEG pictures and things like that. He was adamantly trying to argue that these key points that you raised were explainable by technology, and they weren't. So right there, I think we have an insidious, corrupt alternative media, and people like Jason Goodman represent spies living among us that are limited hangouts and trying to take people into directions that lead nowhere.
And for further confirmation, where he actually terminated his interview with me when we were discussing 9/11, and I was explaining how the videos of Flight 175 entering the South Tower were physical impossibilities because the plane would have crumpled external to the building and fallen to the bottom, body, seats, luggage, and the proof of which included that the plane disappears its entire length into the building in the same number of frames it passes its entire length through air, which is a physical absurdity unless a massive 500,000-ton steel and concrete building provides no more resistance to the trajectory of an airplane in flight than air. He couldn't cope with that, so he just shut me off. He ended the interview abruptly at that point. How bad is that?
Very bad.
Brute force, when you can't cope with an argument. Brute force.
No.
Yeah.
What we're
Really quickly, a little update here on the 29th of December 2019. First of all, it seems like the government is recruiting young men, really nice, the best they can, and essentially turning them into killers, essentially, at teaching people how to kill. And so when they get back from the services, unless they're really disciplined, they could go off with PTSD stuff. But also, update today, it seems that the United States is retaliating against strikes in Syria and Iraq. Airstrikes, we're doing airstrikes, so we're going into another war, it looks like, over there. And so they're trying to keep the aggressions going.
That's very bad news, Don.
Yeah, sorry.
Meanwhile, top 10 stories of 2019, number 3, the arrest and death of Jeffrey Epstein. There's no way Jeffrey Epstein killed himself, a former NYC jail inmate reports. Epstein gurney photos fake. This was actually taken in a firehouse. It has all the fire equipment, not in a hospital. And the face appears to have been photoshopped. It appears to be Tony Rodda, who is actually Hillary Clinton's brother, who died recently as a way of poking at Hillary here. Epstein turns out to have been a Mossad agent used to blackmail American politicians. A former Israeli spy has claimed Ari Ben-Meneshi, a former Israeli spy and alleged handler of Robert Maxwell, told the authors of a new book, Epstein, Dead Men Tell No Tales, that Epstein ran a complex intelligence operation at the behest of the Mossad. Exclusive. Did Jeffrey Epstein have a painting of Bill Clinton wearing a blue dress and red heels and lounging in the Oval Office inside his Manhattan mansion? Visitor reveals bizarre image inside pedophile's $56 million lair. Well, there's no question about it. There it is. Bill Clinton in a woman's dress. Bill Clinton is a sexual predator. He raped many women. He's had many suits brought against him, most of which were settled. But the Clinton body count has revolved among other issues about critics of the Clintons, Bill and Hill, on different grounds, all shocking. Meanwhile, this is from Robert David Steele's website, an update on Epstein's paradoxical death. Option A, Epstein will be taken to a plastic surgery center in Switzerland run by Khazarians to have some work done on his ears, teeth, and face. Wexler ran the op. Giesland was his handler. This is a mega run op, meaning this is a Mossad op, one of many. Research Mega and you'll understand, since Mega has total control over U.S. law enforcement, the Department of Justice, the CIA, and the FBI, no real investigation will occur. Or option B, President Trump is a genius. His tweet is misdirection from the real story. Epstein is now comfortably secured and cannot be eliminated in a witness protection program. What a great way to poke the Clinton. Works for us. We lean toward option B, U.S. military, not Mossad, rip Epstein out of jail. Meanwhile, when I discuss these matters with Jim Rothstein, who is a New York City Gold Shield detective who cracked many pedophile cases, He told me none of this was surprising to him since, based upon his experience, 70% of the American political elite is involved in pedophilia. They all wanted Epstein silenced precisely because dead men tell no tales. We don't know yet whether that's exactly how it's playing out. Stay tuned. Scott.
Well, we know some facts about the Epstein situation that no one else is reporting, and that is when Epstein was prosecuted originally in Florida, he was prosecuted by Rene Alexander Acosta, who later became the Secretary of Labor under President Trump. And Acosta was fired around the July 4th weekend. Interestingly, we saw Acosta standing behind President Trump at the July 4th festivities, which is very, very odd. And it was around that time that we had reported that Acosta, no one else has reported it, but we had reported that Acosta was the prosecuting attorney in the Florida district against Epstein originally. And Acosta said, intelligence have told me to drop the case. Now, Acosta was also the prosecuting attorney who prosecuted Union Bank of Switzerland whistleblower Brad Birkenfeld, who had fled Switzerland after Edward Snowden had targeted him with the CIA in Bern, Switzerland. Edward Snowden had conveyed that to Glenn Greenwald in a story that came out in 2013. Immediately after that story came out is when Senator Bill Nelson wrote to Dianne Feinstein about me and my connection to Snowden and Booz Allen Hamilton, after I had sent reports that Brad Birkenfeld had given me in 2012. And 2012 to 2014, all of this was going out. Michael Isikoff and Tom Hamburger of the Washington Post and MSNBC News came down and interviewed me. So this whole thing is incestuous. You couldn't make it up, but it's very real and verifiable. The other thing, interestingly, about Acosta being the guy who prosecuted Brad Birkenfeld, he prosecuted Epstein, and then he snuck into the Department of Labor and said intelligence had been behind this. Acosta needs to be fully examined and exposed, and all of this needs to be, put forth and brought out. These are things that you cannot make up. They're not illusions. They're not fabrications. I lived it. I lived with Birkenfeld in a federal prison and debriefed him. I got all the documents that he gave me, the bank account holders. One of them was a Russian oligarch, Igor Lenikov. Another one was a financier named Abdullah Aziz, who was connected to Rudy Giuliani in New York. The FBI Counterterrorism Task Force, the CIA, all of them were involved in targeting Birkenfeld because of the Clinton Foundation and the Clinton State Department connections to Union Bank of Switzerland. And Robert Wolf, chairman of the Americas, who pops up on Fox News, who was Brad's boss and also formed a consulting agency. All of this stuff is verifiable, and it needs to be fully exposed by the Trump administration, or else they are guilty of aiding and abetting this larger conspiracy. But Epstein was a Mossad agent. He was an intelligence operative, if you will, or he was just a man who set up the honeypot, the honey traps for politicians and other people in order to videotape them and get leverage over them. Bill Clinton flew on the Lolita Express with these young girls who were recruited into sex slavery by Epstein. Bill Clinton flew on this plane, 27 times? Yeah. Hillary Clinton and the daughter went to Texas to the ranch.
26.
26. So 26 times and there was all sorts of rape and.
Any idea what was going on, Scott?
Yeah. So these sort of things with the gunpowder that comes out of a civil war, that ignites a civil war in this country, because when your daughters and your children are stripped from you by courts that create an easy divorce culture, and these young girls are alone and vulnerable in shopping malls, and they're lured by these Israeli Jewish Mossad operatives that come in to set up the sex slavery traps and put them into the conditions of Jeffrey Epstein, and then lure other politicians in to get leverage over them to conduct pressure operations and intelligence operations on the behalf of Israel. Then you really have no country left. You have no law enforcement. You have no court system of any repute. You have no intelligence system. So all of these things, from Epstein and his being squirreled away or shuttled away, either Trump is a fool to have allowed Epstein to be taken, or he's done the what you described before. He's got the military who got in and got him, and they are going to squeeze him for every ounce of intelligence, which they should, because that's what the American people would want to know. How many politicians have been videotaped having sex with little boys that are now easy to control by a foreign intelligence and a foreign government, namely Israel? Jim?
That's
Yeah.
right.
It's stunning, Scott, stunning. Meanwhile, top 10 stories, number 2. Humanity threatened by push for 5G, which is even being promoted by Trump, much to my dismay. CBS News admits 5G is already causing staggering health problems. The threat 5G poses to human health, what you don't know will alarm you, will also harm you. From the Epoch Times, the crime scene was straight out of an Alfred Hitchcock movie. 150 dead birds lay sprawled on the ground, fallen out of trees in a park in The Hague, Netherlands. The second such occurrence last autumn made Dutch citizens look up and wonder. With robust starlings turned upside down at their feet, the usual suspects of disease, pollution, and foul play were dismissed. The culprit stood atop a nearby train station, a mast with new 5G network antennas. The test of the telecom system failed in more ways than imagined. As a result, the Dutch ministry postponed its 5G spectrum auction until 2020. In a couple of years, 5G network will become the connecting digital issue for drones, autonomous vehicles, blockchains, the Internet of Things, supply chains, smart homes, smart meters, smart appliances, smart buildings, and smart cities. Not so smart to have them. The allure of 5G superfast download speeds will be broad and pervasive, but will come with a hidden cost of invisible RF transmissions, electromagnetic radiation, and constant receiving, transmitting of Wi-Fi signals that most people overlook as benign. Absolutely stunning. Meanwhile, 20,000 satellites for 5G to be launched, sending focused beams of intense microwave radiation over the entire Earth. 20,000 satellites. Public attention about 5G has been focused on the plans of telecom companies to install millions of small cell towers on electric utility poles on public buildings and schools, on bus stops and shelters, in public parks and elsewhere, even in national parks and on federally owned lands. In local urban communities, get this, there would be a cell tower approximately every 500 feet along every street. Meanwhile, 5G is the stupidest idea in the history of the world. Washington State biochemistry medical science prof. The facts. Martin L. Paul, PhD and Professor Emeritus of Biochemistry and Basic Medical Sciences at Washington State University, outlines a new report. The many health risks associated with 5G technology and wireless radiation in general. Reflect on. 5G is gaining attention. It might make us a little fearful of the effects, but we must observe this fear and bring things back to awareness of the issue so we can make better choices. We have to protect ourselves from 5G. Are 5G-enabled smart ambulance tests contributing to multiple deaths of UK ambulance workers? It looks like the answer is yes. In recent communication, East has denied they're participating in 5G-related trials. However, why did two sources in the Telegraph indicate that they are? Could their denial be technically true if they're trying out new tech but not specifically called 5G? While our internet team is not currently available to follow up, there are a lot of loose ends here. In September 2019, a leading telecom service provider in the UK announced it would be providing connectivity for a new smart ambulance at Millbrook Proving Ground, a vehicle testing facility in Bedford. The project will involve equipping a standard ambulance with state-of-the-art devices and connectivity to create a smart ambulance that will simulate 5G connectivity, transforming the vehicle into a unique remote consultation room. In a disconcerting series of events, 3 employees at the East England Ambulance Service Trust have died in the last month. An article in the Welland Hatfield Times reported East employees included Christopher Gill, 41, who died at the Garden City's Birch Court in Howlands on November 15th, and another paramedic from Luton, Richard Grimes, and 999 operator Luke Wright, 24, from Norwich. This is all stunning stuff. Meanwhile, Deagle, which is a major website connected to the military-industrial complex and with deep intel sources, has been predicting the population for various countries in 2025. Notice China, a modest increase. Notice India, a modest decrease. Notice Russia, a modest increase. Notice Japan, a more substantial increase. Notice Brazil, a modest decrease. Notice the United States of America, evisceration of 2/3 of the population, from 326 billion to less than 100 million. That's over 225 million deaths in 5 years. Scott, I believe 5G is a principal mechanism of death upon which this projection is based. Your thoughts?
Yeah, again, more and more, the 5G technology is destructive to the human cell, the human body. The scientists, people are rising up and declaring that it's a threat to their constitutional right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So it needs to be engaged on a federal level. But I see a civil war coming. I see people out there blowing up the cell towers of 5G technology if they see this, being aggressively pursued, because they're not going to tolerate, microwaves living around them. And the 5G technology is a perfect weapon to insidiously eradicate a population. But again, I think the American public have had enough, and I do think they're going to be wise to this, and they're going to be declaring it like they did the Second Amendment sanctuary cities. They're going to declare 5G sanctuary cities, 5G sanctuary counties, because they are not going to risk the health of their children for this sort of technology. And Trump has made a bad decision in his executive order, celebrating this and championing this for the sake of technology. Many of his orders are good, but many of them are very bad. And these bad ones could come back to haunt him if not.
Something has to be done about this, Scott. This is a major menace to health, especially here in the United States. Deagle just didn't pull those numbers out of their rear. That's a real serious projection of the decimation of more than 2/3 of the U.S. population in the next 5 years. That means 2 of the 3 people on the average aren't going to be around 5 years from now. And that, alas, may include people we love and care about, and even ourselves.
And those that are left will be mentally deranged and have real health problems. So we're all turning sick. So our modern technology in the last decade is being used terribly. I mean, the wrong people are using it for control over. Give me back the last decade.
That's a very astute observation, Don. The damage to those who remain, even if they're alive, they're going to be severely impaired. Top 10 stories of 2019. Top story number 1. It looks like the Democrats are going down hard for 2020, and impeachment is not going to save them. Nancy Pelosi wore all black on the somber day of impeachment. It was all political theater. There was no justification for it. Nevertheless, it was the first purely political impeachment in American history. All the Democrats, save 2, voting for it, all the Republicans against it, 1 Democrat voting President Tulsi Gabbard, which took up an appropriate stand. Sputnik interviewed me. It looks like the Democrats will go down hard in 2020 and impeachment won't save them off. While House Democrats are proceeding with their impeachment effort, the writing is already on the wall. and they won't succeed in removing Donald Trump from office, says an American scholar, predicting a landslide Trump win in 2020. Following the House move, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell dropped a hint about a quick trial in early January 2020. According to Reuters, no Senate Republican has signaled so far that she is ready to impeach Trump, which means the Republican-controlled upper chamber of the U.S. Congress is unlikely to find the president guilty. According to James Fetzer, professor emeritus at the University of Minnesota, the House Dems impeachment effort will not only fail to remove Trump from office, but is likely to backfire on the Democratic Party during the 2020 election. As things stand, it looks like the Democrats will go down hard in 2020, he predicts. The professor suggests the impeachment inquiry launched by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Chair of the House Intel Committee Adam Schiff in late September 2019 was driven by the fear of a landslide defeat in 2020, where the president they despise has been succeeding beyond anyone's wildest expectation. As Representative Al Green, Democrat, Texas, observed, if we don't impeach this guy, he will get reelected. But it appears increasingly probable that even impeaching Trump is not going to save the Democrats from political annihilation in next year's election. Fetzer notes, outlining 4 major reasons why, by his account, the Democrats' effort is destined to fail. First, the Democrats don't have a viable candidate. Neither Joe Biden, tarnished by the focus on Ukraine's Burisma case, nor rich white New York billionaire Michael Bloomberg seem to be a feasible option for the Dems, let alone former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Second, 31 Democrats who gained their seats in the House during the 2018 midterm elections in red states Trump won in 2016 run the risk of losing those seats if they support impeachment, as they have done. I guarantee that the vast majority of them will not be returning to the House, and lacking the majority, Nancy Pelosi will no longer be Speaker. Third, after nearly 3 years of nonstop, highly biased mainstream reporting about the Russia interference hoax, the American public has grown weary of the demonization of Donald Trump. The academic stresses, adding that CNN ratings have dropped to a 3-year low given the nonstop 24/7 impeachment coverage, while those of Fox News, with its more balanced coverage, are rising. Fourth, during the week following the announcement of the impeachment inquiry, Trump's approval rating increased by 5%, the professor elaborates. It had been at 46%, but climbed to 51%. Moreover, in key swing states, his head-to-head comparisons with the leading Democrats similarly improved before the impeachment. 3 of them were leading Trump here in Wisconsin. After impeachment proceedings, he's leading all 4. Meanwhile, the House-Senate impeachment impasse would mean Trump wasn't impeached at all. This is a Harvard professor, Noah Feldman, whom the Democrats had testify at the impeachment trial on legal aspects, now observing President Trump isn't technically impeached until the House actually transmits the articles to the Senate. Feldman, who testified in front of the House Judiciary Committee's impeachment proceeding earlier this month, argues in a Bloomberg op-ed the framers' definition of impeachment assumed that impeachment was a process, not just a House vote, and that, strictly speaking, impeachment occurred and occurs when the articles of impeachment are presented to the Senate for trial. And at that point, the Senate is obligated by the Constitution to hold a trial. So we have a disaster. The Republican ship is already at the bottom of the sea. Hillary on the masthead, Nadler, Schiff, Pelosi, all underwater. They're simply not willing to admit it. Another brilliant political cartoon by Ben Garrison that sums it all up in a single devastating image. Scott, your turn.
Yeah, that final political cartoon is exceptional, and we talked about that before. It is a sinking ship that the Democrats are on, and all of your reasons laid out in the Sputnik article are right on the money, Jim. I concur with them all. I did an interview with Sputnik as well, and I said essentially exactly the same thing. You know, all of this is going to fall flat. It's going to blow back on the Democrats. They're actually creating a very hostile population of voters because of this, because they're not seeing it in a compartmentalized frame of mind. They're seeing it as part of a cohesive whole story. And that's what the Democrats have miscalculated. They underestimate the American public already. That's because of their latent liberal fascism and arrogance and vision of the anointed, as Thomas Sowell had written. The leftist Democrat thinks that everybody is stupid except them, and they love to also beat themselves in a guilt-laden, self-hating, political agenda, and they also hate the American public, and they do all sorts of policies to abuse the American public, and this is one of them. But they've miscalculated. The American public have not looked at this and said, wait a minute, this started in 2016. It started with the weaponization of the CIA, the FBI, the State Department, the intelligence agencies. It started with false investigations into into Carter Page. It extended into the WikiLeaks publishing emails from Hillary Clinton and John Podesta. John Podesta, who was involved with Pizzagate and child sex trafficking and pedophilia. That was the story that really came out in the emails of pizza and pasta and the language of pedophilia. That's why they had freaked out originally. That's the undercurrent behind a lot of this, is the pedophilia issues that still exist, that Podesta was part of, Obama was part of, Michael J. Robinson, aka Michelle Obama, the man who pretends to be a woman, the death of Joan Rivers and exposing that. All of this started in 2016, and when Trump was elected, they panicked. They tried to entrap Michael Flynn and Michael Flynn's lawyers, Covington and Burling. Covington and Burling were part of the Clinton machine. Covington and Burling were part of the Eric Holder, Lanny Brewer shell game of terrorist financing. They represented Union Bank of Switzerland. They represented Dubai, United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia and Qatar. So Covington and Burling representing Michael Flynn is putting a chicken in, or a fox in charge of the hen house. All of that was reported in Shell Game way back in 2012. September 11th or September 25th, 2012 is when we put that out there. September 11th was the same day as Benghazi. It was also the same day the CIA did a payoff of $104 million to Brad Birkenfeld to silence him on a lot of this material, though he hasn't. And then, of course, it followed through and the Russia hoax, the Russia propaganda of Russia meddling in the election was false. And then we transmitted to Ukraine and Hunter Biden and the obvious corruption and the bribes that have been going on, and Ukraine writing op-eds against Donald Trump, Ukraine having Christopher Steele ironically involved in intelligence reporting in Ukraine, and all of these people, Ukraine being overthrown by Obama and the State Department apparatus, Victoria Nuland and her husband, who was notoriously connected with some of these left-wing organizations. All of this stuff is coming out, and the impeachment is a desperate attempt to shut down Trump's investigation of all of this. But Rudy Giuliani has allegedly gone over there and got a huge paper trail of all of this corruption. I think it's going to be seen in 2020 is going to be the year when all of this comes back to prosecute and end the political life of the Democrats. I think they are going to be hung by the neck until dead, and that day is coming, and the American public are going to be the ones that pull the linchpin. Jim?
Let me add another major reason why the Democrats are going to lose is that recent polls have shown as much as 34% of likely black voters support Trump. I have another estimate from an NFL player who's very knowledgeable politically that a minimum of 20% of blacks are going to vote for Trump. With that kind of support from the black community, there is no way the Democrats can win any election, not even for dog catcher. So I think the deal is sealed, but they're going to make desperate ploys. That's why we have the cornered rat is the most vicious. We have a situation where the Democrats are cornered rats, and I expect them to pull out all the stops to cover their own complicity, their own corruption, a lot of which has revolved around Ukraine, not just Biden's, but Pelosi, But John Kerry, others have had their sons on Burisma. Rudy's got the goods. It's massive, it's extensive, and they are scared.
Yeah, yeah. And I'll say one other thing. Recent rallies for Trump have had, I've heard that the percentage of the Democrats has been in there, about 24, 25%. The Democrats are now coming into the Trumps, and they're not protesting. They're switching. So it looks like Trump doesn't have to do much campaigning. It looks like he's got it sewn.
Registered as Democrats. And of course, that would be also true of these blacks who no doubt would have previously served as Democrats. Scott, any concluding reflections on our top 10 stories for 2019?
Well, I think the other story that's going to come out in 2020, and I say this sadly, but I forecast it and I predict it, and I'm always going to talk about it. I think you're going to see a Manchurian candidate assassination of a Democrat political operative blamed on a pro-Trump supporter to try and traumatize the American public into not showing up for Donald Trump or voting against the Republicans. I see the Democrats doing that because it's the only option they have for political victory is to do a Manchurian candidate false flag assassination of perhaps Hillary Clinton or perhaps Bernie Sanders or someone, so that Michelle Obama can rise up and run for president, or Oprah Winfrey or someone like that. Always remember the Democrats are fanatically delusional. So to vote for a black woman is part of their mindlessness. But I could see them pulling something like that, Jim, because they are at that level of insanity. The Democrats are on the road to insanity. They're already there. But Americans know that, and they're waking up and confirming that. I love the video the other day of a guy going to Pelosi in San Francisco, and he says, "Hey, Nancy," and she comes over and shakes his hand, and he says, "Prison is coming soon," and she just looked and backed away. That's the statement to all of these Democrats: prison and execution's coming.
Candidate, it's not going to work. Trump supporters are not going to be played. It's just going to vindicate Trump's observation that he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue in broad daylight, he'd still keep his support. He's going to keep it because he's a genuine guy with certain serious flaws. This 5G thing is among them. His mindless support for Israel may or may not be part of a broader scheme to keep your friends close and your enemies closer. I would like that to be the case.
Me too.
I predict, regardless, absent the actual assassination of Donald Trump, he will be overwhelmingly reelected in 2020.
And if anything happened to Donald Trump, you would most instantly have a civil war in this country.
I think that's right.
They've tried too. I mean, there's been assassination attempts. I got to say that they've been watching Truth versus News. The special shows are filming on the 29th. This is going to air on January 2nd, next decade. And I will say that, like I say, the modern technology we have here has been turned against us, I'm afraid. It's not the best. And so I'd like to go back another decade to live a little freer than being surveyed and everything. But that's where we're at, folks. So thank you so much for watching. And I guess we just have to say goodbye for right now. And see you next week, next year.